Today, we have the pleasure of discussing a model which investigates the potential benefits of sharing metacognitive information within groups when making repeated decisions about common pool resource use. This model explores various aspects of metacognitive information sharing. Before we discuss the specifics of this model, could you please introduce yourself?
Hello, I'm Nanda Weijmans. I'm an associate professor at the Stockholm Resilience Center at Stockholm University. And I'm researching collective action problems, human behavior in groups, and using socio-ecological simulations to do that.
Thank you. Can you explain the main purpose of the model and how it aims uncover the benefits of sharing metacognitive information within groups when making decisions about common pool resources?
Yeah, so it's really it's really placed in this how do people cooperate and then use the resource sustainably, and really getting into the niche where communication is not taken for granted. So we see that when there's communication that cooperation goes up, but how does that precisely work? And there are some hypotheses in psychology and that actually point to the role of metacognition, which is that you give information about how confident, for instance, you are about the knowledge that you have. So, but this was only theoretical, and since we already had a model of a common pool resource dilemma that was already validated, we thought, let's unpack this part. And the purpose was really let's see whether this hypothesis is right, whether it actually really benefits the cooperation, but also the sustainable use of the resource when you when you share metacognition. So, and then we had different ways of doing that by having it implicitly, so that you express only whether you're confident or whether you hear from others that they are confident. So we had different ways of sharing that metacognition, and then we looked at what the effect was of that.
Thank you. What were the primary challenges you encountered while developing the model, particularly in, varying individual judgment errors, ways of reaching collective judgment, and updating individual knowledge based on metacognition?
So I think the main challenge was more in our process, because this was a very interdisciplinary process. So my colleague who was actually guest researcher with us, she is Helen Fisher. She is an environmental psychologist. So she came with us, and she learned about our model AgentEx, the original one, and then she was intrigued about this. And then we did this together, but she wanted to try to learn also to do social simulation. So at some point she really got it, but then she was adding way too much, like what she wanted to do. So I think that was a sort of I don't know, it's also a normal process, but it was really a reality check for her, and also for me to how do you guide someone in that process, because it's great when someone is able to go in that level of detail and engage on code level with a model and with the design of the explanations. So I think that was the biggest challenge and biggest lesson learned for all of us. Yeah.
Very interesting. What are the important findings from analyzing this model, especially in terms of the, conditions under which sharing metacognitive information benefits group decision making?
Yeah, so what we could show in our model, because we could, so in our model, we mimic a dynamic common pool resource game that is used for behavioral experiments. And in that game setup, communication can just emerge. So that is also what happens in the model. So that was why it was so useful to explore different setups. So what came out is really that sharing metacognition really was most beneficial when the environment was wicked, and that I mean that there was more uncertainty for the agents. And that made their performance therefore better in the sense of cooperation, but also in the sustainable resource use. In the case that it was more simple, that it was very clear how the resource dynamics were, and that it was very predictable in that sense, then the difference was not so big. So it was really like, okay, as soon as the environment gets more wicked, like the task gets more uncertain, then it becomes really a benefit to have the sharing of metacognition. Yeah. So then it's also really how to get to an agreement is extra crucial to indicate whether you're confident about where we should go collectively or not. Yeah. So that was nice, and that also then really pointed at how important it is to learn more about communication in these kind of settings, to really understand better how that plays out. And of course, this is all an insight that comes from the simulation world. So then it would also really now, okay, given that we now explored this theoretical hypothesis, and it shows that it's really important, let's also research that more in empirics as well to complete that loop of contributing to more knowledge about the role of communication. Yeah.
You have used Countess.net to archive your model. What were the main challenges you faced in the process of archiving the model?
I think it's not so hard to archive a model, but I think it takes a lot of time to write the documentation. We use also the ODD+D protocol. So to take that seriously really takes a lot of time, and that is sometimes a challenge because projects are ending, next projects are starting, so you really need to, put it a bit on overdrive to manage to actually do it, but it's important to us. So I think the process is kind of nice and encompasses how to do it, and of course you could do it more light, but I think it's very important, particularly with these kind of models that are, I think for many, they're rather more complex than people are used to. It's extremely important to be very transparent on where everything is coming from. So I think it's really the time is the challenge to spend on making the documentation work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you mentioned ODD. What do you think about ODD? Do you think it's a good tool for describing models?
I think it's good to have a standard to describe models, so that's also easier for all of us to check each other's work. I think the ODD fulfills that purpose, but it doesn't always work out super well, but that's always with standards. But I think it's a commonly adopted standard, and I think it's important to use that. And no standard will be perfect. So one should also just use the standard, and then when you feel there's something missing, you just add an extra section to just add the things that you feel you need to add. So I think you should keep on thinking of what it is you want to share about your model, and this is a great way of communicating that, but also think of what is so unique about your model, and is that reflected in the ODD? Yeah.
What's your plan for this model? Are there any follow-up studies or, developments planned to further investigate or expand on your findings?
So this is part of a bit of the family of AgentX models, and I think one frontier is really communication, and also the different angles we have to communication. So I think the insight here will be used in other models of AgentX. Also to just do a structural sensitivity analysis of how you get to a group agreement and how knowledge is updated. So from this model comes, and then next step is really also to go more into like, okay, what are other angles of communication that we can bring together given what we learned here? Yeah, and also really doing that with empirics, but also in a next model to add more aspects of communication that are important. Yeah.
So thank you for joining me and sharing your experiences with us.
You're welcome.